everyone in Hollywood knows, there's no easier sell than a sequel, and MMA has followed this model by running back its biggest fights on multiple occasions. A classic first bout, however, does not guarantee a successful follow-up. Today, we look at the fights that were less Godfather Part 2 and more Batman and Robin. Welcome to the INC, and these are 5 of the worst rematches in MMA. By the start of 2022, there seemed to be no stopping Rose Namajunas. Once considered a raw prospect, Namajunas had seemingly come of age, winning the UFC strawweight title and beating a who's who of the division's biggest names. And after a pair of wins over Zhang Wei Li, was even being talked about as the division's greatest fighter. At UFC 274, Namajunas defended her title against Carla Esparza, who entered the match on a 6-fight winning streak. The two women had fought previously in 2014, where Esparza submitted Namajunas to become the promotion's first strawweight champion. For Esparza, it was a chance to regain her title a record 8 years after losing it, while Namajunas was looking to quell the only former champion she'd not yet beaten in her career. Fans anticipated the match as a classic striker versus grappler encounter. What they got instead was this.
I'm looking at these punch stats, and it's 3 for 22 and 3 for 17. I haven't seen 39 strikes in this round.
Namajunas and Esparza spent the next half hour continuously circling the cage, with Esparza wary of being tagged shooting for a takedown, and Namajunas wary of the wrestling threat of her opponent. After just 67 strikes landed between them, the fight came to a merciful end. With no meaningful offense to base their decision, the judges decided to flip a coin and hoped for the best.
Now, UFC undisputed strawweight champion of the world!
The MMA media were unanimous in their criticism of the bout, with MMA Junkie describing the match as unwatchable and topping several fan polls as one of the worst title matches of all time. Namajunas hasn't competed in MMA since the bout, last appearing at a Polaris grappling event where she was submitted by fellow UFC fighter Jillian Robertson. The fight, meanwhile, gave Esparza her something new, as the fighter married her childhood sweetheart in a ceremony the following week. So maybe Namajunas was just being charitable. Frankie Edgar's match with BJ Penn in 2014 is not only one of the worst rematches of all time, but also one of the strangest. The two men had previously fought twice in 2010, with Edgar claiming a controversial decision to win the UFC lightweight title, before vindicating his win in a dominating showing 6 months later. The fight started a career decline for Penn, winning just one of his next 4 fights, and briefly announcing his retirement after a one-sided loss to Rory MacDonald. The Edgar bout marked Penn's first match in 18 months, as well as his first time competing at featherweight. While Edgar boasted an age and form advantage, fans hoped the new weight class would see the return of vintage Penn. The fighter would indeed go old school for the bout. Very old. I'm talking 19th century boxer old.
And BJ Penn, Kenny, very upright here to begin things.
Extremely upright.
Edgar would dominate Penn throughout the fight, catching the veteran with trademark darting combos, while Penn bounced around on his tippy toes, offering little threat in return. The bizarre stance left Penn vulnerable to Edgar's takedowns, and after succeeding twice in the first 2 rounds, Edgar managed to break his opponent's guard late in the third. UFC President Dana White had urged Penn to retire should he fail to avenge his prior losses, and seemingly shared the boss's sentiments during the post-fight press conference.
The biggest regret would have been is if I didn't get in the ring tonight, because I'd always wonder, and I'd always kick myself in the butt, and I'd always complain to Dana and complain to everybody that, man, I could have did it again. And now I know for sure that I can't.
Edgar used the triumph to get a second win in his career, twice competing for the UFC featherweight title and securing his place as one of the sport's all-time greats. Penn, meanwhile, would reverse his retirement and continue competing for another 5 years, and in doing so, breaking the record for the longest losing streak in UFC history. Sometimes a rematch is considered bad for its pointlessness. By 2003, Wanderlei Silva was the undisputed king of Pride's middleweight division, his all-action style carrying him to wins over the sport's all-time greats, and later breaking the record for the most wins and title defenses in company history. Among Silva's scalps was MMA legend Kazushi Sakuraba, The two men had fought twice in 2001, with Silva winning the first fight in 90 seconds before taking Sakuraba's middleweight belt 6 months later. Sakuraba would win just one of his next 4 fights following the match, with many viewing him as a shadow of the pioneering figure from a few years ago. That in no way stopped prize bosses from booking a match between the two for the opening round of the middleweight Grand Prix. While some clung on to hope for a final piece of Sakuraba magic, most expected Vanderlei to make easy work of his increasingly washed opponent. And after landing several heavy shots early in the fight, he disposed of the legend in brutal fashion.
And there it is!
The Axe Murderer would go on to win the tournament with victories over Rampage Jackson and Hidehiko Yoshida, part of an 18-fight unbeaten streak that secured his place as one of the sport's all-time greats. Pride, meanwhile, would continue to exploit Sakuraba's name, suffering losses to Little Nog and Ricardo Arona before leaving the promotion in 2005. Can a rematch be so bad it ruins the quality of the first fight? At UFC 205, Tyron Woodley defended his welterweight title against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. The fight was Woodley's first since winning the belt 4 months earlier, with the two men engaging in a classic bout considered one of the best of the year, with Woodley retaining his belt after judges ruled the fight a majority draw. Demand was high for the two to run the fight back, and fans seemingly got their wish with a rematch set for the main event of UFC 205. With Woodley's knockout power and Thompson's savant striking, the two men complemented each other perfectly, and fans were hopeful of another classic encounter to surpass their previous outing.
So 5 minutes down, only 6 significant strikes landed combined.
While the first fight played to each fighter's strengths, the rematch had the opposite effect. Woodley happy to stay on the outside while waiting for the perfect shot and offering Thompson no chance to utilize his counter-striking. Woodley scored the fight's most meaningful strike by dropping Thompson in the final round, a moment that proved pivotal as the chosen one retained his belt by majority decision. The fight's poor reception led to a reassessment of their first encounter, with Woodley forced to defend both matches during his appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast.
How different was the second fight? It was really kind of the same fight.
Pretty much the same.
So how is that fight of the night, and then the very exact fucking fight a few months later is a boring fight? If you say it's boring, the world's gonna say it's boring. If Dana says it's boring, the world's gonna say it's boring.
Woodley produced another clunker in his next title match with Damian Maia, developing a reputation as a boring fighter which stayed with him until his release in 2021. Thompson, meanwhile, would become one of welterweight's most popular fighters, last competing in December 2022 in a fight of the night performance over Kevin Holland. Ken Shamrock is the king of bad MMA rematches. Shamrock's first dud came in 1996, when he took on fellow legend Dan Severn in the main event of UFC 6, a rematch from their first meeting which saw Shamrock win the inaugural super fight title. The match, however, was marred in controversy, as the Michigan State Athletic Commission enforced rules hours before the event outlawing the use of closed fists. What was billed as a grappling showcase instead became a 25-minute slap fight, with Severn getting the judge's nod by split decision. After turning his attention to pro wrestling, Shamrock returned to MMA for a grudge match with light heavyweight champion Tito Ortiz, with their match at UFC 40 regarded as one of the most important in company history. The fight's lore led to a redux at UFC 61, one which ended in controversy when Shamrock accused referee Herb Dean of stopping the fight prematurely. A trilogy bout between the two would take place 3 months later, with Shamrock again losing by first-round stoppage. Shamrock would spend the next decade competing on the regional scene, before being coaxed back to the mainstream for a match with fellow pioneer Royce Gracie, 23 years after the two's first meeting at UFC 1. After 2 minutes, which looked like Herbert and Franz on Family Guy, the fight saw its pivotal moment in the middle of the first, when Gracie caught Shamrock with a low knee which immobilized him enough to claim the win. After creating a scene in his second match with Ortiz, you'd expect Shamrock to handle the loss with the grace and dignity of a man of his age.
He did it on purpose.
Make it look controversial. There's no controversy in that inning that I saw.
Shamrock wisely called time on his career after the fight, ending his career with 28 wins, 17 losses, and more dud sequels than Disney's straight-to-video division. And now, time for a few dishonorable mentions. Holly Holm and Raquel Pennington's rematch was given the co-main of a Conor McGregor pay-per-view and returned the favor with 15 minutes of clinching against the fence. Mark Hunt versus Bigfoot Silva is considered the greatest heavyweight fight of all time. Mark Hunt versus a depleted Bigfoot 12 months later? Yeah, not so much. The third fight between Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz proved so bad, it shut down an entire promotion. This is the INC. Please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a video or another horrible rematch.